Welcome to the Architect's Measured Sketchbook with Clay Rokicki. I'm Winston Chappell, a member of the Board of Directors and co-chair of the Education Committee with the Southern California chapter. This lecture is being recorded. I wish to thank our very generous sponsors that you saw during the opening slideshow, especially Tim Barber Architects. We have several programs this fall. Please visit our website for details. This class is part one of a two-part class on measured drawing. Some of you will be joining us on Saturday, November 6th for part two, field drawing at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, which has many wonderful small classical and Egyptian tombs and mausoleums I will be instructing. I'm pleased to introduce our guest speaker for tonight. Clay Rokicki started at Historical Concepts in 2006 after graduating summa cum laude from the University of Notre Dame with a degree in architecture and a concentration in furniture design. In 2010, Clay was awarded the J. Neil Reed Fellowship from Georgia Trust for Historic Preservation, enabling him to sketch his way through Southern England. That must have been a pleasure. He currently serves as a chair of the Education Committee of the ICAA's Southeast chapter and was instrumental in founding the Young ICAA for emerging professionals and students in the Southeast chapter. Clay is a principal at Historical Concepts and co-leads a design studio with firm founder Jim Strickland. Please welcome Clay.
Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here again with you. I had the good fortune to do this last year as well, and I'm pleased to be back. Let me share my screen here so that you can all see. Winston, let me know if that's coming through.
Coming through.
All right, well then I'll begin. So today we are here to talk about measured field drawing, which is, for anyone in the design profession or any enthusiast, I think is a tremendously valuable way to become more design aware and become a better designer. So your typical AIA introduction slide, I'm not sure if you all are applying for credits, but this course is eligible for them. So the learning objectives here, you'll be learning about the history of the architect's sketchbook ranging from the Renaissance to today. You will learn how to measure details and accurately draw them in a sketchbook. You will improve your design skills by becoming familiar with excellent examples and precedent. You'll increase your understanding of scale and proportion by measuring and documenting details. What is a measured drawing? It's a drawing of an existing building, object, really anything that is drawn to scale on the basis of measurements that you take in the field. So as we look back to the Renaissance, a name we all know and probably love, Palladio, Andrea Palladio, Italian architect from the Renaissance during the 1500s. These are some of his measured drawings from the baths of Caracalla in Rome. So what immediately strikes me about this page is that it's not a precious drawing. It's got a lot of notations. It's made to capture information and as a source of learning for Palladio. He's not concerned with the pretty picture at the end. He's really gathering data so that he can inform his own designs. And so I always like to tell people who may be intimidated to pursue drawing in the field that measured drawing is a great way to get your feet wet and to get that experience and build up your skill and build up your confidence, because it's not about necessarily what the drawing looks like, although that they can be very attractive. It's whether it's a pretty drawing or not, you're still getting that information and that learning. So similar to Palladio, here is a Baldassare Peruzzi, another Renaissance architect from the 1500s. His work you can see here on the top right, Palazzo Massimo in Rome. It's a wonderful classical building with this curving facade and these interesting window frames. But here's one of his drawings on the left, similar to Palladio. He's doing some great studies of existing details and tablatures, documenting the pieces, the parts, the ornament. You can see here he's indicating a little plumb bob that he's hung to get dimensions that are sticking out. So it's a great way to learn, and even the masters have done it. So if they could do it, we can do it. Again, Peruzzi, an ancient Roman cornice. Here he's looking up, doing a reflected ceiling plan, and here's a little section through that on the top right, where again it's a messy drawing. He's making notes to himself. He's taking dimensions. They're all scrawled all over the place, and I'm sure in doing that he captured a lot of data that helped him later. So if we just think of three main reasons to do a measured drawing, you're understanding your environment and the language of architecture through sketching and measuring. So much of classical architecture is, a good analogy is language. You're learning how the pieces and parts go together, the syntax of it, to put together coherent compositions. And the pieces have different roles and different, there's decorum, there's places where moldings are appropriate and places where they're not. So you're learning about that through other successful compositions. You're recording existing buildings and site for later use as precedent. As traditional and classical designers, precedent is an important part of how we learn. And similar to, most other professions like medicine or pharmacy or, chemistry, you want to learn from what came before you. You don't want to just, pretend like none of that exists. We believe that it makes us better to learn successful results from the past. And you're developing awareness of scale through accurate and careful drawings. So scale being, how big are those balusters? How big should this molding be? How big is that casing relative to the size of the opening? How big is the column diameter relative to the height of the portico? All these scale and proportion, how things are relating to each other and how big they are relative, to the human dimension is an important part of understanding how to bring a successful design to fruition. So here, jumping forward in time a little bit to the 18th century, you have John Soane, who is a tremendously talented architect. He's documenting in much the same way as Palladio and Peruzzi. He's studying Roman ruins and he's studying the temples at Paestum, which is these wonderful heavy Greek revival things, which I think you can see in his works, like at the Bank of England, where he's got this kind of thing coming into play. But similarly, these are not, I wouldn't call these aesthetically pleasing drawings. They're about gathering information. They really are. He's looking at architraves and entablatures and column spacing and height and proportion. And it's just great. It's great to see that I can do the same kind of things that these masters did. So a little bit closer to my home here on the East Coast in Atlanta, one of the Georgia classicists, as we call them, is Philip Schutze. And he had the chance to study at the American Academy in Rome, did some wonderful sketchbooks there. And he's really a master of classical architecture, and he practiced in the early 20th century. You can see him as a young man on the left in his wonderful suit there, which I'm sure you're all going to be wearing suits when you go to the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. He's there in Rome with his giant, sketch pad there and drawing implements, and did a lot of great measuring drawings. This is probably my favorite slide in the whole presentation because of you really can't do that anymore. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but in the bottom left here, the picture 19, this tiny little person that's standing almost under the dome there of the Pantheon, just the sheer scale of it, and these cartoon ladders that they were on, that in their suits and hats. It's just a wonderfully different world that they had the chance to go and touch these things that are precious World Heritage sites, and learn from them. So that's, we can get similar experiences today, but not on some of these extra special monuments. Here's one of Schutze's drawings, and it's a combination of this finished rendering, this little fragment here in the bottom, this page from his sketchbook, which if you're ever in Atlanta and you have the chance to go to the Atlanta History Center, you can actually hold this physical thing, which is pretty neat. And then some reference pictures on the left. So this is not too different from how we might put together a lookbook or a vision book today, or a design package. You're documenting your precedent, you're showing something a little more polished, and you're showing your measured drawing here, where you're gathering the information. And just like Peruzzi, he's whether or not he actually did this, but chances are that he did hang a plumb bob and use that to take dimensions off the face of this very complicated classical composition here. Jumping forward in time to the swinging 1960s, you got Quinlan Terry in England, who is still alive today. He's in his 80s, really a master of traditional and classical architecture, particularly in the arena of the English country house. And then his son, Francis Terry, is also practicing in that same way. Quinlan Terry is well known for his measured drawings, and he develops his to a more finished level. This particular one, you can see traces of that on the right-hand side where he starts to hardline it in his sketchbook, and does these kind of axonometric projections of the profile. So, most of the time when I'm doing a drawing like this, I'll just do the profile itself and put the dimensions on, and but he's taking the time to draw this egg and dart and the bead and reel here on the, in a very beautiful way. George Saumarez Smith, which sounds a lot cooler than George Smith, I suppose, is a practicing architect for Adam Architects in England. He's also in the world of academia, I think. So has been to the States and helped teach at places like Notre Dame. But he's probably, in my opinion, the best practitioner of measured drawings going right now. And he, I don't know how much time he takes to do these, but they're really tremendous drawings, and several of them are here in this presentation. This is an example of an urban space that he's measured, and it's splitting the pages of his sketchbook. My bet is that he either used one of those wheel measures or simply his pace, the width of his pace to draw this. And so what I like to show about this is just that it's great to do a door casing or a molding or a cornice or something like that. But if your interest is different and you are intrigued about the scale of an urban space or the overall dimension of a building, you can approach it with the same mentality. And you can learn a lot from an urban space by taking the time to just walk around it and dimension it out and draw the plan. Here's another drawing by George Saumarez Smith from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. You can see a photo of it in the top left there. They've got this facade fragment within the museum that is it's the entrance to the American wing, where they have all the antique furniture, which I would highly recommend if you're over there. It's not it's never crowded. There's it's not as exciting as the fancy paintings, but it's really neat to go see all the old furniture and so forth. And you can get up to this facade and touch it and measure it, just like George Saumarez Smith. And he's clearly taken the time to carefully draft out the coursing lines there, and that is probably how he got a lot of the alignments and got it to work out very nicely. But a beautiful measured drawing that probably took several hours. Here again are some George Smith drawings, column bases, which these are from St. Peter's, and you can see, on the surface, you think, oh, column base, that may be boring. Maybe I should try something more exciting. But I'm telling you, they're always more interesting than they seem. Even a simple Doric or Ionic base has some fun things to it, and most of them are slightly different. And you can see there's some, if you compare left to right, just how different these are. Similar but different. So they're worthwhile studies for sure, because you can always get up close to them. They're easy to measure. The security guard usually doesn't care if you're touching the column base, and there's a lot of fun curves and tori, I guess you would say, and all sorts of fun things. George Smith studying the Campidoglio in Rome. I like this drawing on the left. It's really great because it's some casing details, or architraves as you might call them, and then a little 3D sketch of the context, which is a very nice, carefully done little doodle there. But the bottom drawings are the kind that I love to do, because I'm always curious about molding profiles and how the scale of those relate to the scale of openings, and whether they change from doors to windows, and how big they are, how far they project, the series of moldings, how long the flat pieces are. There's so many little decisions and things to learn from even a simple study like that. Here's a wonderful measured drawing of Michelangelo's tomb for Julius. Here's another George Saumarez Smith drawing of some railing details, and stair treads, which are another really great fun, accessible thing to draw. Many old homes, many old public buildings have a super high quality railing designs that are a lot harder to achieve today. And there are artisans out there who can do them, but just studying the profiles, the handrail profile, or the scale of the pickets and the balusters, taking the time to do a tracing of the the cutout details, it's a rewarding and it's easy to get to. So I would recommend that as a very viable thing for study for those of you who don't want to get up on a ladder or take on something that is more daunting. So I think these might be the last George Smith drawings in the presentation, but he's done whatever that is, a clarinet there on the bottom right, and then some floor plans, which again are really great to study, just to get a sense of scale and relationship of spaces and that sort of thing. This is a great one. So on the left, Quinlan Terry, who we've spoken about, he did a measured study of some gauged brick details from the 18th century, and then apply that as precedent on a new building design in Williamsburg, Virginia. So that this is kind of the exactly the process that I love to see, where someone is learning from the past and adapting that into a new design. And it's really fun how the different brick textures work and how that highlights the classical detailing, and you get these custom shapes, and it's a lot more exciting than if it was just simply done in wood. Here's some other wonderful examples. Singleton Peabody Moorhead, what a name that is, architect. These are his sketchbooks, and you can see his list of qualifications there, but clearly a really talented person. He's using a large format sketchbook with gridded paper and studying everything from furniture to handrail profiles, door paneling, shutters, eave returns. So a wonderful kit of parts. I personally wonder if he did all these separate and then combined them into these very pleasing compositions where all the space on the page is used very efficiently. Or maybe he just did enough of these where he was really good at that. But I think this is kind of the highest form of composition and measure drawing, where it all is laid out so attractively. This maybe is a little more realistic in my book from the drawings that I've done. You can still study things in profile and do little axon sketches, and these wonderful cornice stops that are uniquely American, from all the way from Nantucket through Williamsburg and kind of all along the eastern seaboard there. Just the different ways that can work. So such a simple thing on the surface, oh, that's just a flat board and a shaped board, but when you really start to study and compare them, it's a rich subject. So I would say, one piece of advice is to just follow your heart, follow your muse, whatever speaks to you, that's what you should take the time to draw. And then another example from Thomas Tileston Waterman, architect and architectural historian. Did not